Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our session on Resolve the Unsolved by Penicia EBS Consulting. Today, once again, we'll do deep dive into opportunities and specific to developing economies. We did a session a couple of weeks back, specifically focusing on Africa, post which we got a lot of queries. And I would like to share with you, we are in fact working on a couple of opportunities. Mr. Goyal is also leading one of the operations. We are in the process of tying up new avenues for a couple of entrepreneurs in the process. We have been getting a couple of queries for growing economy in the past couple of weeks. That is when I thought of catching up with Amitabha. Amitabha, been having spent enough time in this sector, in this geography of implementing various projects, and we thought it's time we should spend some time and discuss about opportunities at length and take it from here. Let me introduce with me today on my panel, we have Mr. Ravinder Goyal and we have Amitabha Ghosh. Mr. Amitabh Ghosh would be our guest speaker for today. Amitabh has spent a rich 30 years plus across segments across the industry. He's an engineering graduate and I am Calcutta alumni. He has a rich industry experience across sectors. When I say across sectors, it spans from IT to power to BFSI, auto, telecom, all across. And he has been heading reputed organizations throughout. He has been heading as a managing director for Aptech Southeast Asia operations. He was a CEO for Anais Pata, which was associated with Reliance. He has been the CEO for GEMS Education, setting up skill operations in UK. In fact, at present, he is using his entire experience and transferring his capabilities to help startups across the sector into different industry segments. And for the last 4 to 5 years, he has been mentoring and helping them to achieve greater heights. With his deep experience of setting up operations in Southeast Asia, we thought it will be a good opportunity to invite him and understand the basic nitty-gritties about if any entrepreneur is looking forward to set up business operations in Africa, Southeast Asia region. Welcome, Amitabh, to the session.
Thank
Let
you.
me once again, I always use the word once again for Mr. Ravinder Goyal because me and Mr. Goyal are together in all the sessions. This is our 19th session. Not the least, Mr. Goyal comes with a rich exposure of 25 years plus of exposure, and he has been uh, providing and educating the masses in skills across this last 20-25 years in IT and various other skill sectors. He has managed operations directly and has implemented more than 200 plus centers. Today, he is parallelly focusing on three startups of his own, mentoring them and helping them out. One is into recruitment, one is into digital learning, and the third one where we are part of is into consulting space. So he's wearing two hats, one of an entrepreneur and at the same time of an advisor and a consultant. Welcome, Mr. Goyal, to the session once again. To start off with, I would request Mr. Goyal to say a few words, then we come over to.
Thank you, Sandeep, and hello, entrepreneurs. I welcome you all in our 19th webinar under Resolve the Unsolved Forum. The name itself says that we try to raise up issues which are probably there and not been answered because of certain reasons. When we talk about expanding businesses or looking out for more opportunities, as the today's topic is opportunities in developing markets, so I'll say the business is like a bubble. The moment oxygen, till the time oxygen is there, it will remain. It will remain there. The bubble is there, and once the oxygen is punctured or maybe oxygen is over, so you don't have it. So you have to always have oxygen going on. So sometimes it's like maybe another example we can take up is like cycling. Till the time you are rolling cycle, you'll be able to balance. The moment you stop, so you will fall down. Very few people, I must say, magicians or typically trained people who can hold on the cycle without pedaling it. So business needs continual growth, and you must look out for newer opportunities. That's how you can grow in times to come, or can sustain the business as well. So we have today Amitabh Ghosh as our expert speaker, and probably he'll be highlighting a couple of foreign markets to expand, and we would like to take advantage of that. Thank you very much. Now back to Sandeep to take it further.
Thank you, Mr. Goyal. Amitabh, welcome you once again, and please, it's your time. You
Thank
can
you.
roll it as you want.
Thank you. Thanks to Mr. Sandeep, Mr. Ravinder Goyal. Before I start, I was doing a little bit of checking on the background of Mr. Goyal, and somewhere where I was connecting, and I thought it is a phenomenal journey for him because he was concentrating more on the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 locations of the country. And that's where I think actual India lies. And he has been contributing there. And he was also, in a way, competing with the biggest of bigs in the industry, and he has been successful. So I think the journey doesn't start right now with what we are doing with younger entrepreneurs, but it has started much earlier. And I'm sure a lot of his students are today doing something which we have been talking and we will be discussing. Second, at the beginning of the session, we were discussing with Sanjeev, and he was mentioning about value systems, and he was also mentioning about the current scenario, what we are going through. So I thought, let me connect with that, because as a human being, I think all of us present over here are extremely fortunate because we have been born during this time. People who have seen 1991, people who have seen whatever we have been going through in 2008, and people who are also seeing what we are going through in 2020 post this pandemic and during this pandemic. I think probably in the history of mankind in last 5,000 years, nobody has seen this. So that's where I think we are extremely fortunate to go through all these exciting journeys and cycles. So from there, I wanted to start and get into the opportunity part. See, opportunities, obviously, when we are talking about new opportunities outside the country, we are not demeaning the opportunities inside India. Inside India, there is a huge lot of opportunity which is already existing. We are aware of that. But with the entrepreneur people over here, we wanted to discuss something outside where you can probably go and focus. And I have been, again, extremely fortunate to have worked in these territories in the last 25 odd years. So the first is Africa, because you already had some discussion on Africa in the past. And I was told by Sandeep, it was a very animated discussion where there were lots of queries, and it's great to see some of these are translating into actual business. Africa as a continent, we have been taken through in the past by Ajay. But just to repeat again, it is a huge continent with more than 50 countries, actually 54 countries to be specific. And it has a whole lot of diversity. If you look at the next 50 years of human history, probably the kind of opportunities which we can get in this continent alone will be kind of making it smaller for the rest of the world. When I'm talking about diversity, we are not only talking about different countries, we are talking about different kind of languages, different ethnicities, different religions, even inside a country. And by the way, it's not a small place. Obviously, population wise, population of Africa is almost the same that of India. They have also something like 1.3 or 1.4 billion population, which is like ours. But it is very fascinatingly different from what we offer. Now, since I mentioned there are 54 countries, let me talk about one of the country, like let's say Uganda, where I have been frequenting in the last 4 or 5 odd years. So, this country is a smaller country compared to India. India is almost like 33 lakh square kilometers. And this is a smaller country. It is a 2.5 lakh square kilometers. And, whenever we talk of India, in the last 5 years, 10 years, or even 15 years, when NSDC was formed, we always used to say India is the youngest place of the world and we are growing at a very fast pace. So my thoughts started changing when I went to these countries like Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, Rwanda, the eastern side of Africa, where I have mostly gone to. Uganda, by the way, before I proceed, uh, would anybody like to have a guess on what is the average age of the country, our country, the median age of India? I'm just asking a question. Anybody would like to hazard a guess? It's not a tutorial. I'm just throwing a question so that we can have a little bit of participation.
It is 29 years, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely correct, Ravinderji. And when we say young, you would be surprised to know this country which I am talking about, Uganda. Any guess again, Ravinderji? Uganda?
I'm sorry, Uganda are not.
Anyone else?
Yes,
Sorry?
maybe a year or so less than us, maybe around 20.
Yeah, it's a good one. Uh, Majority of Africa is 20 and less.
Oh,
Uganda is actually 15.7. That's the average age of Uganda.
that means they're just growing up.
They're just growing up. Almost 48% is up to 14 years of age. So 15 to 24 is another 20%. So nearly 70% of the population is less than 24. And actually 15.7 is the average age. And it is not very significantly different from others. Ethiopia, which is a much larger population, uh, the population in Uganda is roughly, I think now, mm, around 4 crores, 4.3 crores, something like that. And Ethiopia is 10 crores. Ethiopia's average is 19.8. So that's what is very different from us. When we say we are young, they're much younger than us. If you look at the another thing which is significantly different, which I have found over there, is the fertility rate. If we say these are some demographics which probably are interesting and it will help us in the journey. Most of the countries which we are aware of, a lady delivers 2 kids or maybe 3 kids or maybe a little lesser. But Uganda, the case in point is 5.58. That means almost every lady has got 6 children.
Okay.
Otherwise, by and large, the country is very similar to what we are. Now, why? Because it has been a British colony. So most of the it's a republic actually. So, but the structure of the judiciary, the structure of the legislative, the different banks and everything, whatever they have done, it has been in the terms of what Britishers have been developing in the last 50 to 100 years across the globe. Obviously, when we talk of Africa, Africa has clearly two divisions. There is a there are these British colonies like Uganda, like Kenya, Ethiopia, which is more on the eastern side, and again on the western side, and little bit on the central and southern side, we have the French colonies. So these are the francophone countries. Again, if you're talking about opportunities, opportunities are lying in all these countries, be it a Morocco, which is absolutely there on the western side, and again Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, Ethiopia, which are on the eastern side. The basic difference is one is the language.
Amitabh, just a query. As you were talking about opportunities, when we talk in terms of GDP, isn't that they're also growing at the same pace as we are?
It's a very good question. Again, when we talk about our country, we have been always saying we have been growing very fast and all. Of course, because of the COVID, we have come down a bit. We were growing. We all know we were growing consistently at 6%. Sometimes we had reached 8%. But most of these countries, incidentally, have been growing at more than 6%. Somewhere it is even more than 10%. Like Ethiopia today is growing at close to 10.9% as of 2019-20 figures. So they are young and they are also growing very fast. Thanks, Sandeep, for asking this question. I think that also gives some perspective. Despite this huge growth which is going on, and the monies, there is a lot of money which is coming to the entire Africa in the last 50 years because of the foreign NGOs. If you look at a private NGO like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or you look at a World Bank, or you look at IMF, all of them have been pumping in money to these governments, and they're lucky. Apart from that, last 10 to 15 years, there's a huge lot of money also coming from China. China has been giving them a lot of soft loans and loans at a very cheap interest, almost all 30 to 35 countries of this continent. And they are developing the infrastructure, which is the hard part, the roads, the railways, the bridges, all those constructions. So if you are happening to go through Kenya or Uganda or even on the western side, most of these countries on the roads, you will be finding a lot of Chinese construction work going on and chinks are moving around. That's another part of Africa. But why are we discussing this? See, I think many of you are already aware because you had another seminar. Uh, Brown skin, that is us, that is Indians, are highly respected in these countries. Something like which we have for the white skin even now, or we have been having for the last 20, 30 years, that kind of respect they have for the brown skin, that is for Indians. They look up to Indians for technology. They look up to Indians for consulting, training, education, and definitely for the work culture which Indians have been bringing in. Many of these countries, since the time of Idi Amin had pushed out Indians from Uganda, have settled in other parts like Tanzania, like South Sudan, Congo. These are all contiguous countries. So a lot of this business is being done by Indians, and be it an entrepreneur who's originally an Indian or actually an African entrepreneur, they look forward to having talents and talent from India. That is an area where we still score over a lot of other countries in the world. On a slightly frivolous note, I think the white skin has been kind of charging them and overcharging them, and they have also been robbing them dry in a way. So they have a lot of respect for Indians. So that is something which is interesting for us. And obviously, if the skill development and training hasn't happened in their education system, so there is a huge potential for us to go and contribute in these kind of countries. So that's one point I wanted to make. You have a young population, you have, of course, a country and all this entire continent full of natural resources. huge lot of capital coming in, and since it is English, we can do the same thing which we have done in Southeast Asia probably in mid 90s. Where we could do an IT revolution, I will come to that later, was more because of our technology prowess those days. Same thing can be practiced over here because these countries are actually almost like 20 years back where we were, or even 30 years back where we were. So, and having a huge Indian diaspora over there, it is not a place where you feel completely alienated and out of the world if you go in, because you would be smelling the dosa, or you would also be seeing a lot of Indians moving around on the road. Obviously, as life has, you have, along with positives, there are also challenges. Uh, there is still a challenge of security in many of these countries because the rich poor divide is very high. As it happens, even in India, in these countries, you have the rich class and you have the poor class, and there is hardly any middle class. So if the Indians are moving around and they are moneyed, so they have to be cautious, and sometimes they have to be over cautious in some of the countries like Nigeria, which is not the case in Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, but security is a threat. Secondly, for budding entrepreneurs, I think apart from doing great business, the other thing what we also need to find out is how you can do the repatriation of funds. You can make a lot of dollars in those countries. Can you bring it out? So that's again another area where you have to be very cautious, and we can't generalize with one sweeping statement for all 54 countries. So these are all discussions which we have to get into when we look at a particular country.
Right.
Third, uh, despite having democracy, the political climate is somewhat edgy, and uncertain. Again, since we started with Uganda for no specific reason, the president of Uganda, incidentally, his name is Mr. Museveni, Robert Museveni. So this gentleman has been the president of the country since mid 80s. So almost for 35 years he is there. But even if he is there, there's a lot of insurgency which happens in the country, and that uncertain political climate obviously can lead to some economic uncertainty as well, which gives rise to fluctuation of currency. So that is another big thing which I have seen in some of the countries in Africa. The currency fluctuation sometimes is not funny, and you can be completely drained because of that. So those are the downsides of Africa.
Right.
So this is in a very nutshell. I wanted to give you a backdrop about Africa and some of the countries which I mentioned. Uh, if you look at again countries like Kenya, it's not going to be very different in terms of the GDP, the growth, and whatever. They're almost similar. Like GDP of this country, I started with Uganda, is roughly around 34 to 35 billion dollars, whereas the other countries there are around 50 billion dollars, 70 billion, 80 billion, like that. The largest being Nigeria, which is 475 billion dollar, which is the largest uh, GDP of the entire continent. By the way, when we are talking about our 2.8 trillion, they're much smaller, but these are small pockets where one can get into and explore. So that is the GDP part of these countries. If you're looking at unemployment, of course, the unemployment is again something similar to what we see between 14 to 20% in most of these countries. So skill development is again an area where one can get into. And incidentally, because of my past with GEMS education and also Vibgyor High, there is a lot of opportunity in the space of B2C in skill development as well as B2G. Government is investing heavily in skilling of people, and they have also been developing now, like we are focusing on entrepreneurship. They have lots of incubators which have come up in the last 3 to 4 years in these countries. Uh, with that, I thought I will just close on Africa, and since we were talking about the exchange rate, I just wanted to shift to another country, the first in Southeast Asia, that is Myanmar.
Amitabh, just before you shift to Myanmar, one small query. Since you mentioned there's a very heavy focus on skill development by the government, is that a direct inference to a lot of industrial opportunities also coming up over there simultaneously?
See, a lot of industrial opportunities are coming up, and a lot of industrial opportunities are also going to come up in the next 4 to 5 years post
Okay.
COVID, because there is a huge pent up demand, which I had seen when I was traveling in 2018-19. Of course, 20, I could not go at all. But they were at the cusp, and they were kind of at a growth phase, and they were going to go up. But unfortunately, because of pandemic, they have also been hit, but much lesser than the developed world and even lesser than India. So there is a lot of industrial opportunities which are coming in. And again, as I said, Sandeep, there's a huge amount of funding which is coming in from the entire globe. In fact, Japan is also investing heavily in some of these East African countries. So I see there's a huge potential in the next not only 10 years, probably 2 to 3 decades, because of their natural resources and whatever they bring on the table.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank,
I just wanted to. Any other question, please?
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody has any queries, please, at this stage? I think, Amitabh, we can carry on. People will.
Great. So I purposely wanted to latch on to Myanmar because I remember the fluctuation of currency. Myanmar is again a country in Southeast Asia, which is something very similar to what Manipur brings on table. If you are looking at our northeastern state, Manipur, the way people dress, the way people talk, the way people move around, a lot of things, the demographics are similar between our state of Manipur and Myanmar. It's a very small country, but I'll start with a small anecdote so that it is slightly in a different note. Incidentally, I went to Myanmar on a very significant day. So it was 11th of September 2001. I was traveling via Bangkok, and I was stuck at the Bangkok airport because obviously the entire globe was going through that twin tower debacle, and all the flights were delayed by between 6 hours to 24 hours. So we were at the airport and we were seeing war on America on all the TVs going on. And instead of reaching the same night, we had to stay back, and then we went to Myanmar, and we landed in Myanmar on 12th of September 2001, the next day of the big twin tower debacle. And I would be saying that I was in for a shock, because considering the morning newspaper to the local TV, nowhere there was any news of America. There was no news of this twin tower debacle, what had happened the previous day, and there was nothing. We were taken to a hotel, a Traders Hotel. It's a very famous hotel over there, but none of Myanmar knew what was happening in America. So America was almost an ostracized country those days in 2001. You didn't have Microsoft on the computers, because I was going for Aptech, so we were doing a lot of IT stuff in the next 4 or 5 years. There was obviously no Coca-Cola. There was nothing of American origin. So our first meeting, incidentally, was with in the Indian High Commission, and the then High Commissioner, Mr. Kajju. He was very kind to take us to his office, and in his office there were connectivity, and we could see what was happening in America on the 12th September, and obviously we stayed for a week there. Apart from that place, typically a High Commissioner's office, that land generally doesn't belong to that country. By the law, it is a part of the original country. So there you could see whatever was happening in the world, but rest of the entire country was completely unaware of what was happening. Obviously, things have been changing, and things have been changing at a very fast pace in the last 15 to 20 years in Myanmar. This is one of the rare countries where they have, for decongesting, they have shifted their capital. Their capital was Yangon. Those days when we used to go to Yangon, which was earlier called Rangoon. So they Because of decongestion, they shifted it to a place called Nepito, and that is their capital in the last 10-15 years. This has also happened in some other countries of the globe. Of course, Nigeria did this in Abuja almost 40 years back. So, but what I'm trying to bring on the table is this country in the last 15-20 years have had a very, very planned move, like a planned capital. The entire country has gone through a lot of structural changes, something similar to what, obviously, in a scale and form and shape, different from 1991 of India, but they have been attempting a lot of changes, and there is a plethora of opportunities in this country. It is a small country, obviously, considering the size. Again, it is also quite a young country. Since we started with the average age, this is also 29 years, relatively young country, population of around 5.5 crores. Huge lot of forestry. Almost 50% of the country is having forest, and it's a very, very peace loving population. 88% of the people are Buddhists in this country. It was a delight for me to work there in the last 10-15 years. And when I talk of Myanmar, I think immediately we should also think of some more countries in Southeast Asia where the government of India has been thinking of and connecting very closely. Again in 1990 or in the middle of 1990, that time there was something called the Look East policy. We were looking at some of our neighboring countries in Southeast Asia, and we started having economic tie-ups with them so that Indian business class can go and contribute there, and our GDP, of course, gets increased. So this policy has gone through several changes and iterations. In the last 4, 5, 6 years in the new regime, the policy has been kind of changed, and the policy has been also named slightly differently. We call it an Act East policy now. And there are four specific countries where the government of India has been focusing. One is, of course, Myanmar. That's why I raised this. Another is, it's called CLMV strategy. It's called Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, CLMV strategy. And these are the four countries where, through Exim Bank, you have got beautiful loans given to Indian entrepreneurs who can set up shop in these countries in specific territories and specific ideas and specific sectors. And you get a lot of other soft benefits from Exim Bank as well. Now, that way, Cambodia is again another big opportunity which I think one can explore. Again, a small and a tightly held country, hardly a population of less than 2 crores. It's even less than where I am sitting today, almost like a less population than Bombay. Um, Again, a young country, 26 years is the average age of the country. Uh, they have a small GDP of 22 billion compared to all the countries which we were talking about in Kenya, Ethiopia, Rwanda, or this is much smaller, but there are opportunities in Cambodia. Similarly, there is a country called Laos where again we are bringing in a lot of focus. This is again a small country with a GDP of 17 odd billion, young country. Again, there is a huge, huge challenge of getting qualified and skilled manpower. And by the way, when I'm talking about manpower, I'm not only talking about people who are entering the working population at the age of 21, 22, 23, 24. I'm also talking about population at the age of 45, 50, 55. If you are talking about, let's say, the industry like insurance, which is developing in Cambodia or Laos, there are lots of CEOs in our country which have been working in this BFSI sector. Probably some of them have been, because of the downsizing, they're not in the industry, they're in different kind of job hunting or different areas. So many of them can go to these countries and they can do these kind of businesses which are probably much primitive than where we were in 2000. The insurance industry in our country started in 2000 when we had those 20 companies coming in and setting shop, all these foreign companies, be it Max or MetLife and Alliance and all that. So they are at a 1995 kind of a stage, and they are again hungry for qualified people, not only at the bottom of the pyramid but even at the top at the CXO level. So there is a demand of that population. Same thing happens with Vietnam. Vietnam is slightly bigger compared to these countries uh, in terms of population, also in terms of GDP and the size. And again, Vietnam also has good lot of opportunities. So this is the CLMV which I wanted to touch over 5 minutes. Uh, when we are talking about Africa, we are talking about parts of Southeast Asia like these four countries. I think we should also touch base on the country which is almost inside our country, that is Bangladesh. You know, we have on all three sides of Bangladesh, India, and the other side is Bay of Bengal. It is a country where I have been visiting since 1999, almost 22 years now, and I see that this country has gone through economically a major rise. It is almost becoming a middle income country right now. And incidentally, with a population of 16 crore, their economy size is quite modest. This is 330 billion economy. And Bangladesh, the real growth is even more than 7% right now, the GDP growth. And they have been consistently growing since 2001, 2, 3. And this country, by the way, compared to rest of Africa, the political scenario is very stable. Yes, they have two major parties. So in the last 30 years, if I consider from 1990, so there has been elections happening every 5 years, and in a very democratic way, the power has been handed over. When I was there in 2001, the power changed from one side to the other side. So it was Awami League who lost out to BNP, Bangladesh National Party, which was led by Begum Khaleda Zia. And the same story has been happening for the last 15-20 years. Obviously, Awami League in the last two times have been winning uh, successfully in the last two occasions. But it is a very stable economy. It is a growth economy. Again, there is a huge lot of business already happening between the two countries, India and Bangladesh. But I think there is still a lot of untapped areas in Bangladesh where I am personally connected. So be it in again those areas of softer side plus infrastructure. We are a partner to Bangladesh in a lot of infrastructure areas. We are helping Bangladesh in FMCG goods. We are helping Bangladesh in some of the sectors of service as well as a nation. And I think still this brings in a very stable economy and a stable country where we can go and invest. And it will be much easier for any Indian to go and start working there compared to Nigeria or a Morocco, because of the language and because of whatever ethnicity we have got. Bangladesh is almost like going and working in, working in Dhaka is almost like working in Calcutta. So there is hardly any difference. Whereas we have that advantage for the last 25 odd years, which we have in our economy. And of course, the kind of robustness we have gone through because of the scale that they'll never be able to match. And there is no match between the two countries. We have a population of 1.3, they have a population of hardly 16 crores. So whatever goods, services we have been doing in this country, which are time tested, similar kind of stuff can be brought over there, and that also brings in a lot of opportunity. So, Sandeep, more or less, I wanted to share between Africa, some of the Southeast Asian countries. Over here, I wanted to stop. Over to you if you have any questions.
Sure,
you?
there are,
Yeah.
thanks, Amitabh, but there are a couple of queries which are there. I'll take you through. Vivek Katyal, I think you wanted some perspective from consultancy in education sector. If you want, you can unmute and speak up, please. Hello.
Yeah, sir. Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Amitabh, sir, I just wanted to ask that is there in means consultancy and education sector have any opportunities available in such kind of economies? Like you were talking about Vietnam as well as Cambodia.
Yeah. Good
I wanted
afternoon.
to ask basically on like consultancies connected to counseling and things like that.
See, specific B2C opportunities in Vietnam and Cambodia on consulting, I won't be able to tell you. But there are opportunities in consulting on a larger scale with the government in most of these countries. So there is a consulting in education they're going through because as luck would have it, our country, wherever we are today, many of these countries haven't gone through that cycle in the last 30 years. Uh, I'm just bringing in the point of Bangladesh. I'll come back to Vietnam and Cambodia. Bangladesh, they have two separate ministries. One is a primary and mass education ministry, another is a secondary education. But to our surprise and to our delight, they are going through a massive change in the entire structure of the education pattern. You know, what we are trying to do in our new education policy, many of these things would be applicable to all these countries, be it Southeast Asia or even Africa. So coming back to Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, so they will be requiring a lot of support in terms of this. Now, if this is there from the government side, will not there be opportunities in, let us say, content development? There would definitely be. But specific to B2C, I won't be able to tell you right now. But there are opportunities in consulting in education in most of these countries because they are going through some changes in the education pattern overall.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you. Amitabh, I think there's a question from Dr. Pankaj Priye. Pankaj, you can speak out. I will read out his query. Do overreaching of Chinese influence have any impact on Indian business tie-ups in Myanmar? Pankaj?
Yeah, same, fine. Means I was interested because whatever inputs I have is that Myanmar it has a lot of Chinese influence, and same because I have been regularly. I have visited Nepal recently for my teaching assignments, and Nepal I have found there is a drastic shift and anti-India feeling, and even same inputs I am getting from Myanmar also. Not anti-India, but very pro-Chinese there, different type. So means I wanted to know if any Indian entrepreneur tries to go over there, means would they be more open to that, or still that Chinese dominance or their influence will have a decisive factor on tie-ups with Indian organizations?
Dr. Pankaj, I think that's a very relevant question. And I have been seeing a change as well. I have also been to Nepal in probably 1991 first, and I also see the changes right now. Since the question is on Myanmar, we'll only focus on Myanmar. Myanmar, when I went in 2001, as I said, the market was completely flooded with Chinese goods. There was nothing but Chinese. You know, we used to even, I don't think Myanmar was producing also anything those days. Almost 95% of the stuff which was there available was Chinese.
Okay.
Now the things have been slowly changing in the last 15 odd years. I would be saying this is slightly wrong a comment if I say that there is any animosity towards China. No, not like that. But at the same time, the kind of relationship which was there 20 years back, there is slightly, it has got tarnished. Incidentally, I'm a board member of one of the companies in Myanmar, which helps companies all across the globe to get into Myanmar and help them to establish right from their office setup to everything. So I see a lot of interest happening from Indian diaspora. A lot of Indian companies are going and setting up. So I don't think there is a problem which Indians are facing. But obviously, China is still dominating that economy. But there is no negativity towards us. Rather, I'll feel the kind of positivity which was there earlier for China, there is slightly, it is getting tarnished now, because probably they have, in some cases, had bad experiences in the last 10-15 years.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. That clarifies a lot.
Amitav, I think there's a query from Sanjeev again on Chinese. Yes, Sanjeev, you can unmute and speak.
Yeah. So, Amitabh, on this, because I visited and tried to work on one of the project in Ghana, it is in the year of 2013, where I went and tried to see, searched Africa is a difficult market for anybody. And especially, the Chinese people have given some $3 billion and they have extracted, that is one part of it, wherever China had done it. But one thing that I have realized there, the dominance in the government and all this, as far as China is concerned, they have good influence on them. So that really, is a hindrance for the new entrepreneur, because as from the China perspective, there is good Indian community of businessmen there, especially the Sindhi and the Gujaratis are there. But I have a feeling after going there is that there is a slight
I think Sanjeev has a bandwidth issue. Anyway, Amitabh, you have got the question.
I've got the question. Yeah. I think that is a very pertinent question, and good that somebody raised it. It is slightly sticky as well. Yes, if we look at the wallet share of Africa, what China has got in the last 5 to 10 years, it is phenomenally much more than what India has got. Sanjeev, I was just answering the question. Yeah. So I was saying that in the last 5 to 10 years, China definitely has got a huge lot of wallet share of Africa. And not only Ghana, almost every country. I have been mapping more than 35 countries. They have given soft loans, and they have been doing a lot of infrastructure work. And as they are also trying to block entrance from other countries. But at the same time, if you remember what I said earlier, there is a lot of respect for Indians in most of these countries, one. And secondly, there is a huge lot of Indians, like you mentioned, many Sindhis, many Gujaratis, original Gujaratis. Now they are probably of that nation. They have got their nationalities changed. They are there. So we have a stronghold in many of these countries. Despite China doing this, and despite China still trying to block, I had several occasions when I was representing GEMS. They were trying to block us in terms of starting our skill centers and schools. But because of whatever India brings on table, obviously GEMS is not an Indian company, but we had brought in a lot of Indians from different parts of this country. We were successful, and incidentally, we run a huge operation across Africa for GEMS, both in terms of skills as well as education, despite the resistance from China. So in these areas, they have a great respect for us, and they have given us entry, and we are doing quite successfully there.
So it's more like we have to go out and not be worried to compete. That's an opportunity.
Sanjeev, I'll just that's a small anecdote. It is very easy now to go to Google and find out what is the ease of doing business, and you will find that our country is 63 and all these countries are 100 plus, and some of them are 180. But these are all on the net. If suppose Mr. Ravinder Goyal, who is there in the business for the last 25, 30 years, he is working in Tanzania, and he is my partner tomorrow there, ease of doing business for me is almost like what I do business with Singapore. So it's number one. So all those things can be cut if you have the right channels and right partners to enter these countries. That's what I was trying to bring on the table. If you look up on the net, you will find that this is a very difficult place to enter. But again, how come all these companies are doing? I was also in a way connected with
Right.
NIS Pata, Centum, and Bharti. So see what they have done in the last 10 years over there. Did they not face challenges? They must have.
No, this was the intention of having these kind of webinars because we have been getting queries consistently. And at this stage, I would like to bring in Mr. Goel too. Mr. Goel, like as an entrepreneur, like we have been talking, because you wear both the hats simultaneously. So I think this is a good opportunity, and I think you might be able to add a couple of pointers at this stage. Please.
I'll share my own example when we were exploring to open up our own centers outside India. So we got an opportunity to set up facilities in China. So we were invited by some of their government delegations, state government delegation. So once we were there, so it was looking very easy for us that we can start because we had everything around. Everything was already established. So instead of becoming hyper, we just had one person there, left for almost 6 months of time to study, to meet and greet colleges, students, and the companies around. After spending 3 months, we could find that a lot of investment is required in terms of converting our coursewares, converting our education patterns or a team of people to their language, to their understanding, what NIT, AppTech, or other companies have done, which were established since long. So I'll advise on to the part until unless these webinars or these knowledges probably make you to understand the market a bit. Now, I advise that yes, like if a company wants to go ahead in any of the countries, one of the partners, promoters, director must spend some time there, participate in exhibitions, see the crowd locally, and the business what they are into, how it is happening there. So until unless you spend some time in the country you are looking to expand, I think probably it will be very difficult to start something there on an immediate basis. Or as what Amitabh said is that you can cut out everything by associating with a local partner. That's the best thing to expand. Now, again, finding out a good partner is again very tricky. So I'll advise to one part of it that we must not expand in hurry. So we must spend some good time, invest time in the country we are planning to expand, and see with our own eyes, with hear
Right.
with our own ears. Yeah.
Thank you. No, that's very important. What you mentioned is very critical and very important. And in fact, since you mentioned about this, at present, in the last 2 months, 1.5 months, I would say, based on the queries which we are getting from entrepreneurs, we are in the process of facilitating what Mr. Goel shared in understanding the markets in respective locations where they are interested, trying to study that market, help get partners, work it out, and take it forward. So it in fact is an opportunity as we focus on evolved economies to simultaneously look at opportunities in growing economies too. Because sometimes it's much easier to compete and to work out because we have an advantage couple of decades head start. Right, Amitabh?
Absolutely.
Sandeep, there is
Yeah.
another query from Mr. Avinash. Uh,
Okay. There is another query which has come in. Mr. Avinash, if you can unmute and raise your query, please.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Am I audible?
yeah.
Yes, you are.
Yes,
I,
yes, please.
Thank you. So, what I have been seeing for many years, China has been always a very constant question in everything that we talk about, any product delivery or any kind of a production or scale. What I believe is that India could have really done a lot in the service sector, especially in the SaaS-based economy. I mean, we definitely gave a lot of way to Chinese companies to manufacture a lot of things. But of late, we have seen they have been successful also in certain other SaaS-based engines like Alibaba's or maybe what do you call WeChat and all other platforms. So I believe if we focus more on that side, India is already very much accepted across the world on the service delivery model. So if we create service economy and a SaaS-based tools, probably we can still have a lot of scope to garner a lot of business in all those countries, which are typically English colonies and English-speaking countries, and later on we can go to other places as well. So I want to know, is that something where Indian government is helping or Indian entrepreneurs looking? How do you, what's your view on that?
I agree 200% with you on this. When we first went to Southeast Asia by the end of 1990s, that is 1998, 99, as APTEC, NASSCOM had a very overarching field across all these countries. So we were almost known as an IT superpower those days. And we could ride on that wave and we could talk to different governments. See, APTEC was, by the way, not an IT training company in Myanmar or Bangladesh or Indonesia, Malaysia, wherever I've been working. By the way, APTEC also had a huge presence in Pakistan. So APTEC was not an IT training company doing B2C. APTEC positioning we had changed when we started doing a partnership with the government, saying that what we bring on the table is to transform your governance mechanisms through technology. So that's how we had positioned APTEC. Same thing had helped us in all countries in Latin America. We have that advantage even today. We can easily go to these countries, and you're very right, the English-speaking countries, and get into technology products and establish ourselves. From there to get into other domains or other geographies would be easier. So that's the right strategy to go forward. And NASSCOM is very, very proactive on this. NASSCOM, by the way, of 2000 and NASSCOM of 2020 are two different animals. NASSCOM is working very closely with the government now.
Yeah, I do agree. See, that's very nice, and always, because I was living in Bangalore at that point of time when NASSCOM in 2000 was active, and I believe in 2000 they spoke about a target of reaching around 85 billion of exports by 2010 or something. But my point is more not towards the government to government size, because their Indian governments and Indian bureaucracy and political system is very confident and very much in gloves with various countries. But my point is to touch base on the B2B side and the B2C side. Incidentally, the scale is achieved when we reach B2C, especially when we see small businesses connecting on platforms like Alibaba. So there you create a lot of interaction with the local population living in those countries, and they start looking you as something, as a reliable, powerful engine to relate to you on day-to-day basis. So that creates a huge brand value for a particular country. And this is where probably I think we could have done better, or maybe if we can do better in next 10 years, I believe then the world belongs to us.
Correct. And I will add to what you said, when we are talking about that was more of a posturing and positioning when we partner with the government. Not that APTEC has been doing great in terms of the overall numbers in terms of business through government, no. But that endorsement from the government that APTEC, see, wherever I was going as an MD, I was speaking with the IT minister, and we had seminars all across 74 districts of Bangladesh, or even some places in Pakistan. So that government endorsement makes you much more visible, and you do not play with the local players. You get into a different level. So that's a paradigm shift, which automatically translates into business in B2C. That's what I was trying to tell you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, of course. I definitely agree. That's a good initiative. And my only humble request is, like, if we push in more B2B and B2C products and platforms and services to the common people, so we have close to 5 billion plus people to touch today, because the penetration of internet has gone much beyond. So by the time it reaches 7 or 8 billion, we will be having even much bigger space.
True.
So that's the whole idea which I was coming from.
Absolutely correct.
Great.
Very true. Very true, Avinash. What you mentioned is very, very specific. And in fact, a couple of tech companies we are associated or in touch with, in fact, are looking at those opportunities which you are aiming at. And you are very clear, because those are big opportunities in B2C and B2B available for private operations. No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah, that's because, see, today, like when we're talking about the current thing which is going on in WhatsApp space, we know all people are talking about new terms and conditions. So this shows that the people's sentiments can be ridden away very fast and in a very big scale if you bring the right product, or you bring a wrong policy or whatever. It affects very fast. It penetrates very fast. So if we bring something very easy, close, usable, friendly, say telemedicine, say teleconsultation, say education, say many other areas where my other dear panel lady, I think Bimi, she was talking about certain things on consulting in Myanmar and all. So all the more, if we go to that small business level also, it gives a lot of confidence to those small, medium businesses and those small, ma and pa shops and small customers, that how they touch upon, like Shopify did in the whole world, like convert every
Yeah.
retail to a shop ERP system. So this is where I was thinking if there any kind of a push from government to support our Indian entrepreneurs so that they reach out to those people and they get facilitated by either way. So that was the whole idea.
Right. Great.
Great.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your points. Do we have any other queries from anybody? I don't see any other queries coming in right now. But anyway, everybody is welcome to write to us, and we certainly will get back to you with your queries. We have been getting good responses and feedback consistently after the webinars. And as Avinash rightly mentioned, there are a lot of initiatives happening in the technology space where we are involved or in touch with. Both Amitabh is also involved, Mr. Goyal is involved, we are also involved. And a couple of new investments are happening where some of our senior advisors are also involved in that space, along with manufacturing and other spaces too. Mr. Goyal, do you have anything which you would like to mention before we?
I think one part generally it's been missed, like the countries, underdeveloped countries we call third world countries.
Yes.
Money is available from the World Bank and from various foundations like what Amitabh shared. Probably what we can do, like there are a number of companies who are not exposed to this part of discussions.
Right.
I think in probably the next couple of webinars, we must try to bring that onto the table where how the funds which are available in such countries can be exposed to the Indian companies, which probably if they are not aware of. So that would be a good topic for us. And out of this discussion, I could understand that it could be one of our next webinar topic.
Right, I think very important. I made a note of it, and I think that will be a good opportunity to discuss on.
I hope you know that one of our friend has taken due advantage of this.
Yes, yes, very much. We know that. Amitabh, anything which you would like to say at this stage?
No, I think I'm good. The point which Ravinder just now brought in, that's also a very relevant point. So only thing is most of these monies are coming through the government. So these are through proper RFPs of government, and there are again ways and means of doing it. So that's a relevant point.
Great. So we come to the final stages of today's webinar. Thank you, Amitabh, so much. Thanks for your time and sharing a rich experience with entrepreneurs over here. Thanks everybody joining in. We'll catch up with each one of you again next week, same time. Till then, bye and have a nice weekend and a week ahead.